What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, live for the first episode of the Bottom Line. It has returned, the Bottom Line 2021 NFL season. I'm pumped. Each and every Tuesday night, we will have this show live, uncut, raw reactions from me from the NFL season. We are ramping it up with the first episode specifically discussing fantasy football, your fantasy football drafts this season, what you need to do to win, how to win your league, who to target, what strategies to take, how to draft the quarterback position, how to draft the running back position, wide receiver position, tight end position, how to beat your friends, and how to take home the cash, because that's what it's all about here for me on the Bottom Line View. So, before we do get started, guys, let me know in the comment section how you feel about a new season of The Bottom Line. We're back. I told you guys, don't bring your kids to this show. This is a late night football show. This is going to be, I don't know what I'm going to say, so you better watch out. But before we get started, I got a very special new intro. My guy, Lenny, my boy, Lenny, the OG, made me a intro for this show that you will see each and every Tuesday night. So, let's get to that intro, baby. Let's rock! Mac Jones is my favorite quarterback in the 2021 NFL Draft. San Francisco 49ers are legit contenders in 2019. Tom Brady is going to win the Super Bowl with the Bucs this year. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the intro. Give a shout out to Lenny. Thank you, Lenny, for creating that intro for me and for the show. Really appreciate it. And everybody, let Lenny know how you do appreciate it. Before we get started into the tips and tricks for fantasy football season, this season, make sure that you do Gronk spike that like button. Don't forget to also Gronk spike that notification bell for the latest upload. All right, make sure you do. Then also subscribe to the channel for more Bottom Line View NFL content just like this. All right, let's get going on the tips. Okay, so fantasy football season has arrived. First off, hopefully you guys haven't drafted yet. Okay, hopefully you guys haven't drafted yet. I hope not. I sincerely hope not that you haven't drafted yet, because last night we had Travis Etienne go down with an injury, and that might have just ruined your entire fantasy season. So I hope you didn't draft yesterday or before that period. And hopefully you don't draft till the end of the preseason. If you do draft before the end of the preseason, please speak to your commissioner and tell your commissioner that Mitch of TheBottomLineView says to know your role and don't draft before the end of the preseason. All right? So, with that being said, make sure you're not drafting before the end of the preseason, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to get hurt. And you might just be out of your cash before it even starts. And my tips can't even help you. I can't even get you out of that hole. All right? So, let's start off with my favorite strategy to win your league in 2021. So my favorite strategy to win your league, first off, identify your league settings. I know this sounds stupid, and I know this sounds simplistic, and to many of you who are experienced in fantasy football, this will sound just irritating, because yes, we get it. Okay, are you in a PPR league? Are you in a half PPR league? Are you in a standard league? That's going to change how you draft, quite obviously. But still, even knowing this, there are far too many people that actually don't understand what that means. People don't understand, who gets an advantage at PPR, identifying the players who are better in which format to target in your drafts, right? You don't want a guy that's a standard guy that's all about touchdowns and yards in a PPR league if he never catches the ball, if his ADP is much higher than where you value other players, right? And it's all about average draft position. We never hate or love players. It's all about the ADP, right? But my favorite strategy overall, once you've identified your league settings, once you've identified what type of league you're in, once you've identified as well the roster composition, that's very important. Okay, you need to know your roster composition because there's a lot of people that are in leagues. I think the general settings on ESPN, correct me if I'm wrong, are 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a flex, a tight end, a quarterback. Okay, that's probably, and then defense kicker. That's probably the average league. Now, I'm not in many of those leagues. I'm maybe in one of those leagues, but I've played in those leagues for many years. So in those leagues, it's a little bit different than the way that I see things this year. In a lot of leagues now, I feel like are shifting towards full PPR leagues. I feel like are shifting towards at least 3 receivers, if not 4 receivers, 3 receivers and a flex, because just there's generally more receivers, all right? So it changes the value of specifically the wide receiver and running back positions, okay? Those are the positions that change the most depending on the roster composition. Because if I'm in a league that's 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and a flex, I will be going after running backs earlier than I would in a league that's 3 receivers and a flex, or just 3 receivers, right? Because it shifts the perception and the value of those positions. If I'm in a league, which generally I am in, 3 receivers and a flex, I'm stocking up at wide receiver, especially in full PPR, because you need great receivers to win those leagues. And if you have an advantage at wide receiver, you're going to win the league most of the time, right? Or if you have an advantage at wide receiver over everyone else or your opponent, you're going to win that week. So it's different for running back. So in the leagues that I'm in, which are 3 receivers and a flex, I tend to go with the strategy known as hero RB or anchor RB, or I think they call it like modified zero RB. I didn't even know what this was called until like this year, but I was doing it before that. All right, so that strategy is picking a running back 1 early in the first 3 rounds, smashing wide receiver, picking a tight end, picking an elite QB, picking anybody, the rest of your roster, and fading the RB2 spot. That's most of the time my favorite strategy, but you can only pull it off part of the time. You can't always pull that off depending on where you pick in the draft, and we're going to get into specifics on that. And then depending on, who you get early in the draft. If you have an early pick, this is a very easy strategy to pull off. If you have first pick, it's ideal because you have Christian McCaffrey, who's basically 2 running backs, right? So the strategy is essentially you're fading the position that's the most fragile. You're getting a really good running back, and then you're fading the second one because it's very hard to identify 2 good running backs, right? So that's kind of the way I see it. It appears that we're really, really fuzzy right now. I'm not exactly sure why. Let's see. Is that better? That's better. All right. So hopefully it wasn't fuzzy for too long. So generally my strategy for fantasy leagues this year is hero RB, which is taking 1 running back early in the first 2 to 3 rounds and then smashing wide receiver, smashing tight end, and stocking up my roster that way. Now, in leagues that are 2 running backs and 2 receivers and a flex, I would tend to go towards probably picking, and this depends on your pick. So if you have a late pick, I would tend to go with 2 running backs early and then avoiding running back for the rest for a large portion of the draft. So if you have, let's say, the 11th or the 12th pick in your leagues, and it's a 2 running back, 2 receiver flex league, then I would tend to go with 2 running backs, 11 and 14, or 12 and 13, or 10 and 15 in the draft, and then probably just fading running back, picking up wide receivers, picking up tight end, quarterback, then coming back later on and picking some high upside running backs later in the draft. That's what I would probably do, and that's how you could modify my strategy, the hero RB strategy, in a league like that, where it's 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and a flex. Now, I will say this. That tends to work much better in PPR leagues or half PPR leagues. It doesn't really work as much in standard leagues. In standard leagues, you do need to pick running backs early. You can't really fade running backs early, even though it's a more fragile position. It's just in standard leagues, it completely takes the advantage of the wide receiver position out of it. Because in PPR leagues, it's much easier to find 3 receivers to start and find 3 to 4 stud receivers than it is to find 3 to 4 running backs. But then keep in mind that running backs also bust at a much higher rate. So you need to be able to balance these things and pick the value in the spots that you deem respectable for those players. So yeah, overall, hero RB. Now, I will say in leagues like that I'm in generally, I don't even mind going 0 RB and fading running back, taking a bunch of receivers, tight ends, because in full PPR leagues, because I think that really, really works at the end of drafts, but I don't think it will work at the front of drafts, right? So if you have a top 5 pick, if you have Christian McCaffrey, if you have Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Zeke Elliott, I would suggest to go with hero RB. Pick that stud running back, fade the RB2, stock up wide receivers, stock up tight ends, stock up quarterbacks, right? So that's what my favorite strategy is, okay? But it depends on your pick and it depends on your format. So number one thing, please, 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 you will not win your league if you don't understand how the scoring works, if you don't understand which positions are more valuable in your league. There's some leagues that have tight end premium, which give 1.5 points for tight end. So it's weird, but the guys that understand that more usually win. And I know it's simplistic, but it's true. So that's my favorite strategy this year. If you guys have any questions about that strategy, let me know. I also broke that down on Patreon as well, which I'll be talking about Patreon a little bit later on. But yeah, so let's get to the next part, which is my early round strategy. So overall, we kind of broke it down a little bit. But early round strategy, again, depends on format, depends on players. But typically, I think the best way to approach early round strategy is basically getting your top players. So say you have a list of like 20 to 30 players. Make a list of your top 20, top 30 players, and you can almost just draft off a list of ADP. So if you just get the top 20 or 30 players based off ADP and just have that list and draft till the end of that list, you'll be set up well in the first 2 to 3 rounds. Like, there's no reason to deviate. There's a reason these players are at the top of the draft. You're almost rarely ever going to, not necessarily miss. You're never going to be able to guess who gets hurt, right? But there's no point in reaching in the first 3 rounds. So just pick up as much maximum value as you possibly can within the first 3 rounds. And again, you guys can use the hero RB strategy. You guys can use a 0 RB strategy. You guys can use a robust RB strategy, which would be 2 running backs or, probably 2 running backs at the first 2 rounds. But you could just pick based on the value and go through your top 20 or top 30 players in the first 3 rounds. And then that's where you get into finding value from round 4 on. Because you're rarely actually going to get value in your leagues unless some people are picking absolutely stupid picks all over the board. They're picking a defense in the 3rd round. I don't know why you're in a league like that, but besides the point, you understand what I'm saying. So that would be my early round strategy. Just pick the best players first and worry about the value later on. All right. So my late round strategy then is a little bit different. So typically, because I draft in a hero RB format or a hero RB strategy, typically what ends up happening is at the top of my draft, I'll draft 1 running back early in the first round. Then I'll pick receiver, 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 4 in a row. or maybe a tight end in there if you can get an elite tight end. And then from there on, I might go back to running back in the 6th, 7th, or 8th round, and then continue to fill out the rest of my roster. I rarely ever pick a quarterback early, and we'll get into quarterback strategy here in a second. But typically, I never really go quarterback early because there's so much depth at the quarterback position. And I feel there's really like 13 or 14 guys this year that I'm cool with having as my starter. And I even don't mind going with 2 quarterbacks in my draft to hopefully fulfill that one spot and just get a smash at the spot. So overall, because that's the way it works, in the later rounds, I am just going for upside. Like, it doesn't even matter. I'm not picking guys that I know are going to finish at the end of the year at running back 38. Like, I'm trying to look for a guy that might not, he might finish at running back 64, but he also might finish at running back 20. You know what I mean? I'm trying to look for those absolute boom players. I don't give a crap if this guy finishes as a running back 4. I'm looking for a running back 1, a running back 2, a wide receiver 1, a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 3. I'm going for the boom at the end of the drafts. I don't care about busts. So once you get past the 8th round, just completely forget about the downside of a player and just think about the upside of the player. Try to think in the terms of, for running backs, what happens if a player in his backfield gets hurt? What does this player become? Right, always try to think about roles. So if you're drafting, running back in the 10th round, Tony Pollard is a great example of this. So Tony Pollard is a good late round pick, even though he is a handcuff and not necessarily startable at the beginning of the year, because if Zeke gets hurt, then Pollard becomes a RB1. He becomes a must start player. Right? There's certain players in your drafts that you might want to mix in, like a James White, for example. For years, James White has been a PPR guy that you can just consistently start. But the downside of James White is consistently going to get points, but he's never going to be an absolute stud because he's simply a pass downs back. He's not a 3-down running back. He's not a guy that will put up points, huge points, every week, even if Damien Harris gets hurt. Like, James White's not taking over a 3-down role at any point, right? Then typically you can find more at wide receiver. That's typically what happens because there's so many wide receivers and they're so talented. And generally it's very, very hard to find, breakout running backs because usually you'll find them on the waiver wire. Like, that's usually where you find them. Like, James Robinson last year was a waiver wire pickup in a majority of drafts. And it was because nobody really knew who James Robinson was until the season kicked off. So, and usually it's because of an injury, right? So, wide receivers, you're looking for younger players. You're looking for guys with a lot of talent, right? It's talent. It's younger guys that have yet to break out. Generally, if there's a receiver in the 11th round and he's a 5th or 6th or 7th year wide receiver, you know what that wide receiver is at this point. Like, you know if he's a 2nd receiver, you know if he's a 3rd receiver, you know if he's a 5th receiver, you know what he is. Like, I think the classic example of that this year is a guy like Russell Gage, who is never going to be Julio Jones. Like, sure, he'll put up some points for you, but there's probably guys going in that same range that have yet to break out, that are extremely talented, were highly touted, and have yet to break out, right? Maybe there's a 2nd-year receiver who you don't know is going to break out, but it's probably worth the shot, right? While a guy like Russell Gage is a little bit more, he's safer for sure. If you're just looking for a guy to fill a spot each and every week, and this becomes the discussion of like, is this a deeper league? Is this a 16-team league? Because then maybe you go with Russell Gage because he's the safer pick. But if it's a 10-team league or a 12-team league, I'd rather take my shot on a guy that is yet to break out. A guy that's young. A guy that has the raw tools, but he's never really shown it yet. So just keep that in mind in the late rounds. Try to go for the ceiling. And just, honestly, guys, this is what frustrates me too. Fuck value at the end of your drafts. Like, fuck it. Like, don't care about ADP. Throw it out the window. Say, bye. I don't give a fuck. I want these players at the end of the draft. Like, if you have a target in the 12th round that you really want, take him in the 11th round. If he's generally going, a lot of people do this. They're scrolling on their computer. All right? They're scrolling on their computer. They're on ESPN. They're drafting, right? And they're like, well, this guy's ranked 120th. Maybe I should just wait till next round instead of picking him in the 11th. Like, bro, if you think that guy's the best player in the draft at this moment, and it's the 11th fucking round, take that fucking guy. Okay? That's all I'm gonna say. Like, just take your guy. All right? That's what I'm trying to say. So, in the late rounds, I'm not saying do this in the 3rd round, in the 4th round, in the 5th round, because you want to pay attention to value in those rounds, right? You don't want to deviate too far away from what ESPN suggests you should pick because you're trying to play the board, right? So you're trying to say, if I'm at the 8th spot and I can get this guy around later, let's take the guy, maybe, this guy early and this guy later, right? So if I'm in the 11th round and the guy is suggested to go later than I want to pick him, just fucking pick him. Like, do you understand what I'm saying to you at this moment in time? So that's what I'm trying to say. The late rounds, F value, just go for your guys. If you think Marquise Callaway is the next coming of Jerry Rice, pick Marquise Callaway. If you think Jacoby Myers is Julian Edelman 2.0, pick Jacoby Myers in the 10th round. Okay? That's what I'm trying to say. So, there you go. If Wave God thinks that Russell Gage, even though I made fun of him, is a GOAT, just pick him, Wave God, all right? That's what I'm trying to say. Pick your fucking guys. All right. Fuck ADP. Next. These are my guys that I want. Late round must-haves, okay? These are my late round must-haves. I made you guys a list. So, let's start off with numero uno, which is Ronald Jones. All right, Ronald Jones is currently going, and we'll look at this later on. All right, we'll look at this later on. So, we're going to look at ADP according to ESPN, and we're going to identify these players later in this episode. And I'm going to go specifically through it. But the first guy is Ronald Jones. So he's a late round must-have, and the reason is he is one of the few running backs in the late rounds right now, which is probably like round 8 to 10 to 12 range right now, that I think he could boom because he's the most talented running back on arguably the best offense in the NFL, period. He is. So according to training camp reports, he has been the guy taking most of the reps with the ones, all right? And to get a guy like that in round 8, round 9, round 10, my goodness. I mean, even if he busts, it's still worth the investment because of his potential, of what he could be. Imagine if Ronald Jones is splitting with Leonard Fournette in the first 2 weeks and Leonard Fournette goes out with an ACL in week 3. What happens to Ronald Jones? He becomes a top 15 running back in fantasy. He's not necessarily a pass catcher, but he's a guy that I want to target because he can probably at worst be a startable asset in my leagues, but at best can be a borderline RB1 just the way he was last year. So I'm trying to tell you, he is a better player than Leonard Fournette, and where he's going in drafts, he is worth the shot, especially if you're light at running back. I would suggest if you're heavy at running back, if you went running back early, then okay, go with a wide receiver in that range. But if you don't have running backs and you need guys that you can shoot for the upside, Ronald Jones is one of those players. We already talked about Tony Pollard, so might as well get him out of the way. But I would throw Tony Pollard and A.J. Dillon in this conversation. So the same thing exists here for Tony Pollard and A.J. Dillon. And I would say both of these players actually, in their range of outcomes, even if their starter doesn't get hurt, they can still be effective fantasy assets because, for one, there are many people, including Kevin Durkant, who says that Tony Pollard outperformed Ezekiel Elliott last year. So what if Tony Pollard is just playing better than Ezekiel Elliott? Have we ever considered this once? Have we ever considered this one time? okay? So Tony Pollard is a late round target, not just because he's a great handcuff, because he instantly becomes a top 12 running back if Zeke gets hurt, but he might just be better than Zeke, and he will get touches if that happens. Then we have A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon is an absolute monster of a man. He is a truck on a football field. This guy is going to get touches regardless, right? I don't care. They got rid of Jamal Williams. Okay, so A.J. Dillon is there. A.J. Dillon, if you've seen him in the preseason, this guy's got thicker thighs than Kevin Durant's girlfriend. I mean, goodness me. This guy's a beast. So A.J. Dillon is a guy you got to target because, one, if Aaron Jones gets hurt, he's a RB1. Two, if Aaron Jones doesn't get hurt, he might have the goal line role regardless on one of the best offenses in the freaking football league. And then number three, he might actually become a real asset to you down the road, especially when games get colder in Lambeau Field and they're putting that big LeGarrette Blount beast out there. All right, so that's a guy to target. Who else we got? Wide receivers. Marquise Callaway. So I wasn't joking about Marquise Callaway. I might have been joking about the Marquise Callaway in the first round, okay, at first overall, but late in your drafts, Marquise Callaway is the pick, guys. I like this kid. So not only did he go off on Monday Night Football, but Turtle's been saying it in Discord the whole damn year, and I think he's actually right about this one thing. He's not right about anything really most of the time, but this one I think he's right about. So Michael Thomas might be out for like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even more. Okay, Marquise Callaway is the number one wide receiver on the Saints. Give up with Tre'Quan Smith. Tre'Quan Smith is garbage. I don't want Tre'Quan Smith. He sucks. I don't want him. Marquise Callaway is the guy, especially with Jameis Winston. So something we have to consider here is that Jameis Winston may not be Drew Brees, but what he does is unlock a new element to this offense. He unlocks the downfield to this offense. Drew Brees had a noodle arm, right? Drew Brees could barely throw further than Nicholas Gill on a Sunday. So, I mean, go with the guy that's the downfield target. Go with the guy that's going to make big plays and get a lot of targets because he's their number one most talented wide receiver. And they're going to pass the ball in New Orleans. They're going to have a productive offense because Sean Payton is a wizard. He is a wizard. So, Marquise Callaway is one of those wide receivers that late in your drafts, 10th, 11th round, pick him up. He will probably be able to start for you from day one, and he does have a pretty big upside, being that he's a number one wide receiver, which is one of the elements that I think is huge to wide receivers. We'll get into that a little bit. Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman's another one. Michael Pittman has slid and slid and slid. He's like on a slip and slide right now. This guy was like going in the 8th round. I don't know, something like that. So now he's going in like the 10th or 11th somewhere. And I don't get it because Michael Pittman's a very good prospect. Michael Pittman, of course, is a lineage, NFL lineage. This guy is the number one receiver on the Colts. T.Y. Hilton is dust at this point. Like absolute dust. He is awful at this point. I'm sorry. I like T.Y. I like the touchdown celebration. He's dust. Michael Pittman's the guy. Who are they going to throw to? Mo Alley Cox 18 times a game? They're going to throw the ball to Michael Pittman. They're going to throw the ball to Michael Pittman. He's their guy. So what you want to do with wide receivers later in the draft is pick second-year receivers. Oh, that sounds like Michael Pittman. Number one targets. That sounds like Michael Pittman. And he's big. He's got size. And Carson Wentz likes big receivers. So when Carson Wentz is back, Michael Pittman's going to be his guy. That's a target for you. Michael freaking Pittman. Then we have 2 rookie receivers who are going at the very end of drafts. Terence Marshall Jr. and Rondell Moore. I was going to go with a different rookie receiver, but I'm going to go with these 2 guys. So, and maybe I'll throw that last one out there in a sec. But Terence Marshall Jr., I think there's a legitimate chance that Terence Marshall Jr. could be the best receiver on his team this year. Like, I don't think that's too crazy. It might be crazy because DJ Moore is really good. But we've seen LSU receivers enter the NFL and have an absolute smash in year one. We saw Odell do this, and we saw Justin Jefferson do this. Terence Marshall Jr. is very talented. He's already lit up the preseason. He's going to play slot in an offense that he already knows from college. And I think he has an opportunity to be pretty productive in this offense. And I think, they just paid Robbie Anderson. I think there's a legitimate chance he could become their number 2 receiver this year. I'm not going to go quite as far as being number 1, but he's worth the dart throw because he's a rookie. He's probably going to be your last pick in the draft, and just see how productive he is at the beginning of the year. I really think this guy's super talented. He already knows the offense, and Sam Darnold doesn't really necessarily have a rapport with any one of these receivers. It's worth the chance to me with your last pick. Then we have Rondell Moore, who I think is going to be the number 2 receiver for the Arizona Cardinals rather quickly. Now, I think AJ Green technically is going to align as the number 2 receiver, but I think they're going to try to get the football into Moore's hands quite often on jet sweeps, screens. He's really good with the ball in his hands. He can make people miss. He's almost like a running back in the open field. And I think it's going to help Kyler Murray because the Cardinals don't really have an effective running game. They don't really have an alpha running back. So other ways of running the ball will be utilizing this type of guy who's the only type of guy on his team to be able to pull these things off. So I think he's somebody that in PPR leagues could probably break out to be, at least a number 3 receiver for you. And if this offense is as good as it can be, he could be even more than that. So those are 2 guys that I would point out at, rookies. I know that a lot of people are also hyping up Elijah Moore, so I didn't really want to go there because Elijah Moore is already being pretty hyped up. So, Elijah Moore is another one, of course. Earlier in the offseason, Rashad Bateman was one that I really like, and I think Rashad Bateman is a guy that if you have an IR spot, I would pick him up. Now he's falling and falling and falling because he's going to be out, 4 to 6 weeks or somewhere in that range. So if you can pick him up late, I think he's a good stash because he could come back and instantly be the number 1 receiver on his team. He really feels like a guy that with Lamar is going to be able to unlock a dimension of this offense that doesn't really exist. And I think he'll be his instant number 1. I think he is the most talented receiver on the depth chart. And I think the final one, the quarterback to target at the end of your drafts is Trey Lance. There's no denying it. If Trey Lance gets in the San Francisco 49ers lineup, Trey Lance is going to absolutely boom for fantasy. Okay, he's just going to boom. He's going to be an absolute stud. He runs the ball. He's got a huge arm. He is a cheat code in fantasy. Quarterbacks that can run the ball are always cheat codes for fantasy. And in a Kyle Shanahan offense with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Raheem Moser, Trey Sermon, this guy is going to be unleashed, and this guy is going to put up fantasy points. I don't care if he sucks as a real-life quarterback. He's going to be a great fantasy quarterback. I'd also throw Justin Fields in there, but I like Trey Lance more. And honestly, guys, if Cam is called the starter for New England, you could honestly just wait till the last round of the draft and pick up Cam Newton. The guy, if he starts, is going to be, which I think he's going to, is going to be good at fantasy because he runs for 12 touchdowns a year. I don't understand the hatred, but I'm just going to throw those guys out there. So the late round must-haves, Ronald Jones, Marquise Callaway, Michael Pittman, Tony Pollard, Terence Marshall Jr., Rondell Moore, Trey Lance, Cam fucking Newton. Okay? Those are the guys. And we will go over more later when we're identifying ADP. So when we're looking at the ADP of ESPN, I'll be able to go through everybody and tell you probably more steals that are on ESPN specifically. If you have a question about anyone that you think could be a steal, let me know and I'll definitely answer. Okay, so next up, the quarterback strategy. All right. So, the quarterback strategy for me is as follows. Be opportunistic. Be opportunistic. So this does, usually I subscribe to late round quarterback. Usually I'm like, I'm not going to even think about quarterback until the 10th round, the 8th round, the 12th round. This year, I'm a little bit different. I'm a little bit more opportunistic. So that means if Kyler falls, if Lamar falls, if, Wilson or any of my top tier quarterbacks, Josh Allen, fall further than I deem them to, that I thought they would go earlier, I'll pick them up. Like, that's my quarterback strategy. Be opportunistic this year. Don't worry necessarily about, everyone says pick quarterback late, so I got to pick a quarterback late. This year, I honestly think there's 4 quarterbacks who are cheat codes. There's 4 quarterbacks who are cheat codes. Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. These 4 players are cheat codes. So if they fall a round or just even half a round further than they should, it's worth the investment. Because if you're sitting there in the 5th round, just think about this for a second. Who has a higher rate of hurting your team? Picking a quarterback in the 5th round named Kyler Murray, or picking Mike Davis? And if Mike Davis just flat out sucks, like Mike Davis usually has, is that going to hurt your team more than picking that quarterback? Because we know at least we're going to get a good season out of Kyler Murray. Even if it's not great, even if it doesn't smash, the chance of Mike Davis actually busting is higher than Kyler Murray. So even though the position is a lot deeper at quarterback and you can get away with picking one deeper in the draft, which is why people say draft quarterbacks late. That's why they say that. Still, you're not going to absolutely destroy your team if you do pick Kyler Murray, or if you do pick Russell Wilson, or if you do pick Josh Allen, right? So just think about that as well when you're thinking about picking a quarterback. It's just being like, okay, I can get this guy and I know he's going to be my quarterback for the whole year. We also have some targets, which when we get to my guys, I'll talk about my targets a little bit later in the draft. None of them are in the top of the draft because I typically don't pick quarterbacks. Like I said, the first 4, if they fall, I'll pick them. But that doesn't make them a my guy. That makes them a value, right? That doesn't make them a guy that I want on my team. So we'll talk about those guys later on. The running back position. So my running back strategy, of course, I said my strategy for overall drafts is hero RB, right? So that's my favorite way to draft, picking one running back in the first 3 rounds, hammering wide receiver, tight end, and then coming back in round 6, round 7, and picking up, a couple running backs that I have on my guys list that I think can break out and be RB2s, maybe even RB1s. So my running back strategy is try to avoid those classic running backs that are pumped up just because they're running backs. So this is what's often referred to in the fantasy community as the RB dead zone. Because every year there's running backs in ADP that are in spots like, let's just say the 2nd round, where they really shouldn't be picked in the 2nd round. Okay? So players like this year, I feel, and we're going to go through it again on ESPN, I'm going to use an example of a player. J.K. Dobbins, I think, is one of these players in PPR formats. I think he goes far too early because he's splitting time with Gus Edwards and because he doesn't catch the ball a lot. So try to avoid players in rounds, 3-4 range, where maybe they're pumped up to round 3 or 4, even though they have a ton of question marks just because they're a running back. That's oftentimes how you lose your league, because there's such a higher rate of getting, let's just compare last year. So you could have picked, for example, DK Metcalf in the 5th round, and meanwhile, another person picked Melvin Gordon. And that wasn't even the worst running back you could have picked. There was guys like Mark Ingram, right, that were being picked in this range. You could pick Terry McLaurin last year. Or this year, like in the third round, are you going to pick a guy like Miles Sanders or Mike Evans, right? Which one has a higher degree of busting, right? Or breaking your team? Because that's a top 3 pick you're spending on that player. So a lot of the times, that's why I only take one of them, because I'm going all in on that guy. If I really like that guy, I can make a case for that guy. I just go with that guy. I'm hoping he can be my stud, and then I'll pick up value at wide receiver and come back to running back later on and avoid all these other guys that have so many question marks. A lot of times I don't want to deal with it, and a lot of times I don't see the difference between a Miles Sanders and a Chase Edmonds. Like, I don't see a huge difference between those guys. So that's just kind of my strategy there. Another strategy at running back is in the middle rounds, so like rounds 5 to like 9-ish, aim for running backs that are in ambiguous backfields. So this comes from JJ Zacharyson, who did a study, he's a part of the fantasy community. He did a study about breakout running backs. And a lot of the times the breakout running backs come from ambiguous backfields. So what does ambiguous backfields mean? Ambiguous backfields means we don't really know who the starter is. We don't know who the number 1 is. We don't know who the stud is. We don't know who the guy is going to be, right? There's a few of these running back situations this year in fantasy. And he deemed that the guy, simply by identifying the guy that is going slightly earlier in drafts, is the guy to pick. Okay? So those guys are Trey Sermon and Raheem Moser, right? Trey Sermon and Raheem Moser are going in the same range of drafts. According to ADP, at least on Underdog, I know Trey Sermon is going earlier, right? Which is a sharper ADP. So by picking, Trey Sermon is more likely to break out than Raheem Moser based on his study. Another one would be Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. Okay, so Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon are going very close together. The guy that's more likely to break out is Javonte Williams because he's going higher in ADP. Another one of these is Chase Edmonds and James Conner. Chase Edmonds and James Conner are in the same range, 2 to 3 rounds. The guy that's more likely to break out is the guy that's going higher, Chase Edmonds. So this was the study he conducted. And the reason he found that these guys break out is because since we don't know who the guy is, we tend to stay away from them in the 3rd and 4th round, and we don't draft them until the 6th, 7th, and the 8th round. Okay? So those are the guys where you can scoop up a lot of value and potentially have league winners on your hands, which is why I like to go with Hero RB, because if I'm able to get a Javonte Williams, a Trey Sermon, a Chase Edmonds, these type of guys, I potentially have a breakout on my hands, but I'm getting him in the 6th, 7th, 8th round, just based on, because we don't know as a community who the running back really is. But typically, it's just the more talented guy. And a lot of times it comes down to injury from an older player, or it comes down to a younger player passing up an older player on the depth chart, right? So that's, I think, very interesting. Take a look at that and definitely identify those guys in your drafts. The last thing on running backs is don't panic on running backs. This is the same thing with the running back dead zone. So a lot of times, a guy will be like, I picked 2 receivers in the first 2 rounds. I gotta pick Chris Carson in the 3rd round because I don't have a running back, even though I think DK Metcalf's way better. Because DK Metcalf fell, I should pick DK Metcalf. He's better. But Chris Carson's a running back. I need a running back, so pick the running back. Like, just don't panic. Don't panic at any position, but specifically this happens most at running back because of the stigma around the running back position in fantasy that's gone all the way back to the early 2000s of like, you need to pick 2 running backs in a row and that sort of thing. So just remember, don't panic, because I think at the end of the day, people don't quite understand value in terms of how you construct your team. I always say this with the tight end position, and we'll get into this a little bit later too. So, tight end position, like when you pick an early tight end, say you take Travis Kelce in the first round, right? A lot of people look at their team at the end of the draft and say, my team doesn't look as good when I pick a running back at the beginning of the draft, or a wide receiver even. And it's because it's only a one-player position and you're getting lesser at running back or receiver. But what people don't really account for is the edge that you get at that position. So the people don't account for, I have Travis Kelce on my team. He is so much better than Hunter Henry, right? Like the 12th guy has Hunter Henry. I have Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce's 100 points better than Hunter Henry, right? So like people don't account for that when they draft or after their draft. The next thing is like, you don't account for flex. You don't account for wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 edges. So people just look at it like, I got a well-rounded roster. I have my 2 running backs. I have my 3 receivers. I have my flex. It's all very balanced. I got balanced receivers. I got balanced running backs. But what people don't actually do is they don't actually say like, I've got 2 weaker running backs, but my second receiver and my third receiver and my flex is so much stronger than my opponent. That's what people forget about. People just say, my running back 1 isn't as good as his. But you forget that your wide receiver 3 is better, right? So that's something also to think about, is like when you draft your team, don't just think about balance, think about actual points. I know that sounds stupid, but it's true. Okay. The wide receiver position. So wide receiver position, I think I went over this a little bit already, but you want to aim for second-year wide receivers in the mid-round. So a lot of times we rank in fantasy, we rank wide receivers that have broken out. Like as rookies, they've played well, but they haven't quite become superstars. So there's a number of these guys in drafts this year. So there's like CeeDee Lamb, who's going the highest, I think, of the group, other than Justin Jefferson, who's already deemed elite. So Justin Jefferson doesn't really count. So there's Justin Jefferson, then there's CeeDee Lamb. Then there's guys like T. Higgins, Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool. Who else? There's lots of them. But it tends to be like last year, Terry McLaurin and DK Metcalf were 2 of the biggest breakout wide receivers at their position. And it was because those receivers typically aren't deemed elite yet. So they're not like quite called Keenan Allen yet. They're not quite called DeAndre Hopkins yet, right? Or I think Calvin Ridley might have been another example of that last year. I could be wrong. So target these second-year players who aren't yet deemed elite at wide receiver, because those are the guys that typically become league winners. So you want to target a guy like, even later, right? Michael Pittman, even a guy like, even take a shot on Henry Ruggs. Like he's a second-year receiver. These guys, typically, wide receivers don't break out till their year 2, typically. So that's something to pay attention to. And the other thing is, look for wide receiver 1s. Try to get wide receiver 1s. So guys that you can identify later, I think my favorite one is Corey Davis. So Corey Davis he's probably going higher now because of his preseason performance, but he used to be going in the 9th or 10th round, which didn't make any sense because he's the number 1 receiver on his team. He's going to have a high target share. Wide receiver is all about target share, right? So target share is like the amount of targets these players are going to see. So a lot of times, like offenses like Seattle have basically a funnel target share. It's DK Metcalf, it's Tyler Lockett, and not many other players get targets. So that's why DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are great fantasy picks. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, right? So try to go for large target shares and go for wide receiver 1s as much as you possibly can, because those players, especially in PPR leagues, are going to be very, very valuable. I know it's simple, but it's true, and it's effective. Trust me. And for some reason, these guys fall sometimes, like Corey Davis is a great example of that. Next, we have the tight end position. So the tight end strategy is, first, don't be afraid to grab an elite tight end. So don't be afraid to draft Travis Kelce in the first round. Don't be afraid to draft George Kittle or Darren Waller in the second round. Those guys are so valuable and such an extreme advantage over every other player at their position that you'll never have to worry about tight end unless they unfortunately get hurt. In that case, you're just unlucky. But as long as they stay healthy, you're going to have a huge advantage. You never have to worry about getting a tight end. You don't have to worry about trading other assets to get a tight end, a breakout tight end. And you don't have to go through the guessing game of picking 2 tight ends later or spending capital later in the draft when you could be picking a breakout receiver or a breakout running back. So people often forget that just because they invested a tight end early, they forget that you will get those picks back later in the draft. Right? People just assume that you're getting that value, you're trading the value of picking a receiver early instead of a tight end, when that tight end advantage is such a big advantage. So just keep that in mind. With other tight ends too, so say you miss out on a top 3 tight end, gamble on athleticism and over opportunity. So go for guys that are great athletes at tight end. So guys like that would be Jonnu Smith. Guys like that would be Noah Fant. Guys that are really athletic, I would even throw Mike Giuseki in that. Like guys that are very athletic tend to be better receivers overall, but tend to be breakout tight ends. These guys that have just freak show athleticism and tools tend to be the truly elite receiving tight ends. Guys like Anthony Firkser, while they're a fine role player in real life, they are not going to be breakout tight ends. You tend to go with the great athletes. So definitely look for the great athletes, and also look for an offense that typically uses their tight end, like the Patriots, like offensive coordinators that like tight ends. A lot of offenses don't like tight ends. Like they just generally don't use them no matter who that player is. So try to identify in the past of the offensive coordinator or that team that they use tight ends, okay? Or quarterbacks even. Look at the quarterback's history too. Next, we've got defense and kicker strategy. So defense and kicker strategy. Wait, please wait till your last 2 picks when you're picking a defense and a kicker. My number 1 tip would be, if you don't have to pick a defense or a kicker in your draft, don't pick them. Especially if you're drafting tomorrow, don't pick a defense and a kicker. Try to pick a receiver. Try to pick a running back. Try to pick a late tight end. Try to pick somebody that could potentially have a role before the season starts. Maybe he goes off in the 3rd preseason game. Maybe his lead running back gets hurt, like what happened with Travis Etienne and James Robinson, where James Robinson went up 5 rounds because Travis Etienne got hurt, right? So if you can identify a handcuff, like you pick Tony Pollard, you pick Darrington Evans. If Derrick Henry gets hurt tomorrow, Darrington Evans becomes very good in fantasy. So if you can avoid picking a kicker in a defense and it doesn't mandate you to pick a defense and a kicker, pick a running back, pick a receiver, pick a rookie receiver, right? With your last pick. But if you do have to, pick them with your last 2 picks. You know, at the most, pick your defense with the 3rd to last pick. That's maybe like the most I'll ever go if I really like a defense. Okay, so that's the way I see it for defense and kicker. Try to identify kickers in good, high-scoring offenses. Try to identify defenses. This is key. Try to identify defenses with a early season schedule that is very easy. An example of that is the San Francisco 49ers. An example of that, I believe, is the Denver Broncos. Another one is, I'm probably missing, I think the Patriots is relatively easy early on. Like, these defenses don't necessarily try to go for the home run defense that's ranked first on ESPN, because most of the time you're streaming a defense. Usually the defense that we pick first is never the best defense in fantasy, almost never. So just keep that in mind and try to pick the defenses based on the offenses they're playing from week to week instead of just trying to pick a defense for the entire year. And please do not pick 2 defenses. That's one of the dumbest things you could do. Do not pick 2 defenses, please. Thank you. Because then you might be missing out on a Darrington Evans who ends up being a top 15 running back because Derrick Henry tore his ACL in the 3rd preseason game. You know what I mean? All right. Next, stacks are your friend. So, what are stacks? So, stacks are aiming to get a share of an offense with multiple players. So you're trying to aim in fantasy. This is very simple, but again, forgotten. You're trying to aim for players in good offenses, period. So you're trying to aim for Chiefs. You're trying to aim for Cowboys. You're trying to aim for Bucks. You're trying to aim for Packers. You're trying to aim for Browns. You're trying to aim for Titans. You're trying to aim for the Bills. Like, get players in good offenses. But then once you get those players, try to get pieces in that offense that correlate. So correlations with stacks would be quarterbacks and wide receivers, for example. So a stack example would be Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. Would be Tom Brady and Antonio Brown, or Tom Brady and Mike Evans. Would be Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. Would be Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, or Amari Cooper, or Michael Gallup. Would be Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf, or Tyler Lockett. Would be Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen. Would be Ryan Tannehill and AJ Brown or Julio. Players like that, where you could try to get a quarterback and then try to bonus your team's upside, because this is the upside. Because think about it. If your quarterback's playing well in that game, AJ Brown, if Tannehill's playing well, if Tannehill's playing well, AJ Brown's probably playing well. If Tannehill's playing well, Julio's probably playing well. It doesn't work as much for running backs unless they're also pass-catching running backs. Then there are some that correlate. Like, I would say maybe Eckler and Herbert correlate. I'd say like Darnold and McCaffrey probably correlate. Saquon and Daniel Jones if you're getting real deep. Like, maybe that's a 2-quarterback thing more so, but I really feel like you're just upping your upside of your team by picking Rodgers and Adams instead of Herbert and Adams, even though they're going in the same range and maybe even Herbert is rated ahead of Rodgers. You're going to get more wins because if Adams and Rodgers are tearing it up that week, you're going to win that week, period. So look to stack your quarterback with one of his receivers. And usually how this is done is like, if I pick AJ Brown in the second round, by example, then I'm maybe starting to think about Ryan Tannehill, in the 10th round or the 9th round, right? So that's the way I think about it. I would usually think about wide receiver or tight end before I think about the quarterback, because usually you're not picking the quarterback before the receiver. Then don't stack, try not to stack early tight end and early quarterback. That would be the one thing I would say. Like, don't try to stack Kelsey and Mahomes just because you're spending too much value on positions that you only start one player. Same as Mark Andrews and Lamar, which massively backfired last year. I'd try to probably avoid that. I know some people like to go with that one just because they're a little bit more affordable, but I'm not a huge fan of that. So just giving you the heads up. All right. My guys. Next up, we have the guys that are my favorites to draft this year at each position. So these are 5 players that are my guys, my favorite players, the guys that I've drafted the most this offseason, and this is according to Underdog. Before we get to the 5 my guys at each position, I do want to give a shout out to Underdog, which I've been playing on all offseason, guys. Link is in the description for Underdog Fantasy. Drafts are still open and actually throughout the season. So Underdog is a platform where they are the best of the best at best ball. Best ball is a format where you draft your team and then you don't have to worry about waivers. You don't have to worry about trades. You don't even have to worry about setting your lineup. They set your lineup for you. There's 18 rounds. It's half PPR, and you have a chance to win money on Underdog, right? So you put maybe $1 in, $3. There's tournaments, $25, $5 tournaments. Right now, you can use the code BLV when you first deposit on Underdog, and you can get a free $25. So you could play in 5 $5 tournaments and possibly win big time cash out there. So for me, I've been using Underdog as a tool to get ready for my drafts, to mock draft for my drafts, to be prepared, to go through every simulation. I've been through so many drafts. I think I looked up today. I was close to 30 drafts this offseason where I've really been going through them August almost every single day, trying to get better, getting ready for my big leagues coming up. So Underdog's a great place not only to win some money and to compete, to try to test your skills, but also to get prepared for your league. Use the code BLV, get a free $25, enter those tournaments, and have some fun at Underdog. So, Guys, I also recommend Underdog because it's a very sharp platform and the ADP is very, very good and very, very smart. So you're just generally going to get better at fantasy football if you play on Underdog. So speaking of Underdog, my guys at each position. This comes from the guys that I've drafted the most on Underdog. All right. So the quarterback position. Let's start off with the quarterback position. I mentioned my strategy, the quarterback position, is be opportunistic. I think somebody said this in the chat. This is another strategy at the quarterback position. Just pick Tom Brady. That's it. Just pick Tom Brady. Okay, this guy is going to throw 40 plus touchdowns this year. Book it. Book it. Book the fucking thing. Tom Brady is going to throw 40 plus touchdowns. You can clip this if you like. Pick Tom Brady. Period. Okay? So he is my number one most drafted quarterback on Underdog. Tom Brady. Typically, you can get him in the 8th round, around there. My second buy guy at the quarterback position, Matthew Stafford. All right? Matthew Stafford is going a couple rounds later. He is my second most drafted quarterback on the platform. Matthew Stafford, if I miss out on Tom Brady, I'm typically going for Stafford. Now, a lot of experts say don't go, or not a lot, I would say a few experts say don't go for these guys who are pocket passers because you're missing up on the rushing upside, but like, I disagree because these guys are in such good offenses that they're going to be so consistent and they're great values at where they're going. I think Matthew Stafford, with the injury to Cam Akers, his stock is only going to rise. Matthew Stafford's going to throw 35 touchdowns. He's going to have well over 4,000 yards. I think he'll have his best season in a long time. And I think he will be in the MVP conversation. I think there's also a real chance that the Rams defense isn't as good as people think, and that actually will benefit Matthew Stafford because he'll be throwing more in these games. So my second, my guy quarterback is Matthew Stafford. My third, and this is more so in 2 quarterback leagues. I've already mentioned Cam as a sleeper. I've drafted him a lot because you can get him in the last pick on Underdog. But Baker Mayfield is one that in 2 quarterback leagues I don't hate. I also don't hate Zach Wilson in 2 quarterback leagues. I think Baker Mayfield's efficiency is going to be very high. I think he's going to throw 30 plus touchdowns this year. I just really like the offense. I think Baker Mayfield's going to be very effective down the field throwing the ball. He won't have as many attempts as Stafford or Brady, but I think he'll put up big time numbers, his best season yet. Then we have Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, man, this guy as a rookie could have a Justin Herbert type season. I don't think the Jets are going to be very good on defense, especially they just lost Carl Lawson. Zach Wilson's the best quarterback in this draft. I've said it once. I'll say it again. He's the best quarterback in this draft. He is very ready. He's very accurate. He's got a very strong arm. He's going to be losing in a lot of games, and he's going to have to put up big time yardage. So I think Zach Wilson's a really sneaky 2 quarterback pick. He also is mobile, so he can run a little bit, and he might even run for a couple scores. So those are some of my guys at the quarterback position. Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Cam Newton, and Zach Wilson. The running back position. Let's start off with the guy that everybody seems to dislike, which is Saquon Barkley. So Saquon Barkley is my guy in the first round because a lot of people are starting to fade Saquon because he's hurt and because he hasn't played yet this offseason. And the reason I've deemed him my guy is because every time I have the chance to have a late pick in the first round, I have been picking Saquon Barkley. Because the people that are not picking Saquon Barkley also don't want to win their league. Okay? Think about this for a second. You are passing on a running back who has number 1 overall upside. So think about this for a second. The guy in first picks Christian McCaffrey. How are you in the blue hell going to pick a player that has no chance of giving you a chance to beat the guy with Christian McCaffrey? So a lot of times people are picking players that simply they give them no edge, okay? The players that are passing on Saquon just want to finish third in their league. I don't care. Ricky Bobby, if you are not first, you are fucking last. Okay? So Saquon Barkley is a guy that you could be first if you get this guy at the 10th pick. Because you're getting somebody that's potentially a third or second finish or a first finish at the 10th, 11th, 12th pick. That's wild. That's wild. So, yes, is he risky? Sure. Are all running backs risky? Yes, they are. Hell yeah, they are. Right? Saquon's just as risky as any other running back. They all get hurt. Saquon, though, is one of the 3 that can actually win you your league. So to pass on him and pick 8, pick 9, pick 10, pick 11 is stupid. Like, it just makes no sense. So he is my guy because if I'm not first, I'm last. I don't care. I don't want to finish third. I don't want to finish 6th. I don't want to finish 8th. I don't want to even finish 2nd. I want to finish first or I want to finish last. Because if I didn't try to finish first, I'm finishing fucking last. So there you go. Saquon is my guy. Joe Mixon, another guy. Everyone hates Joe Mixon because his team absolutely effed him last year. His team messed around with his status week to week. His team constantly left him. This is why people hate Joe Mixon. Because they didn't put him on IR before. They left him on your bench without an IR designation for so long that people just started to hate Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon in the late 2nd round is an absolute steal. Joe Mixon is an absolute steal because Joe Mixon, I guarantee you, is going to touch the ball more times than just about any player in fantasy, period. Joe Mixon is going to touch the ball more than Dalvin Cook. Joe Mixon's going to touch the ball more than probably Alvin Kamara. I mean, it may be. He's going to touch the ball more than Derrick Henry. He's going to touch the ball more than anybody other than Christian McCaffrey. This guy, when he's healthy, is getting 27 touches a game. And it's just ludicrous. When you look at his early season, the first 4 weeks, he was great. He was great, but he got hurt. Again, guys, every running back gets hurt. They just do. Dalvin Cook's missed more games than Joe Mixon over the last couple years. Period. And Joe Mixon is a very good player. Very good. Giovanni Bernard is gone, so they don't have a pass downs back. Joe Mixon in preseason has been playing on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. He is no longer just a 1st and 2nd down player. He is going to now see 50, 60, 70 catches on top of being a really good runner. So Joe Mixon to me is my guy at the running back position because to go in the late 2nd round and get the amount of touches that he's going to get in a good offense is absolutely stealing. So that's why he's my number 2 running back. Number 3, Chase Edmonds is my number 3, my guy. Chase Edmonds is going, I think, in like the 7th round, maybe the 6th round. It kind of depends. But Chase Edmonds in PPR is my guy because he is one of the best receivers at his position in the NFL. James Conner sucks. Can we stop with James Conner? He is terrible. He is the worst running back in the NFL. Chase Edmonds is the lead dog. They want him to be the lead dog. He's going to play on 70 to 80% of the snaps for one of the best offenses in the league. Can someone please explain why we love Kyler Murray? We love the Cardinals. We love D-Hop. We love this offense. We think they're going to score 1 billion points, but their lead running back is going in the 6th round. Why does that make any sense? That doesn't make any sense. Chase Edmonds in PPR is going to catch 60, 70 passes. He's going to run for 800 yards. He is basically Austin Eckler 2 years ago. That's what Chase Edmonds is. And you can get him as an RB2 in PPR, and he's going to be locked and loaded, and you know he's going to see touches every week. So Chase Edmonds is a great PPR pick. He is my guy. Damien Harris is my 4th my guy at running back. Damien Harris is the best running back on the Patriots, period. Last year, he was one of the most effective running backs in the NFL. PFF actually rated him as the 2nd running back in the NFL last season. So that just speaks to how talented he is and how good he is at playing football. The Patriots have arguably the best offensive line in the NFL. They will be one of the most highly efficient rushing attacks, along with the high volume rushing attacks in the NFL. So Damien Harris doesn't catch the ball. So I see why he doesn't have a super high upside. But with the amount of times he's going to run the ball, with the amount of times that he is the guy, like on early downs, he is the guy. He is essentially LeGarrette Blount in 2016, right? LeGarrette Blount in 2016 was drafted super late. I think he had like 16 touchdowns or some crazy shit like that. That is what Damien Harris is now, but they don't have Tom Brady. So they're passing it less, they're running it more. I expect Cam Newton's attempts near the goal line to probably go down and probably Damien Harris's to rise up. Sony Michel, is not going to be very relevant in this backfield. James White only plays on third down. Damien Harris is a locked and loaded RB2. If you pass on running backs early on because you don't want to take the risk in the third or fourth round, just come back to Damien Harris in the sixth or seventh, and you're going to have an RB2 in any format. In half PPR and standard, he is a locked and loaded stud. So Damien Harris, to me, could have double-digit touchdowns. He'll probably will have 1,000 yards. So he is a my guy. The final my guy is Trey fucking Sermon. That is who it is. Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon is a my guy. Why is Trey Sermon a my guy? Because Raheem Mostert's going to get hurt within the first 5 snaps of the season. I'm not trying to be mean to Raheem Mostert, but Trey Sermon is a my guy because the 49ers are a really good rushing team. Kyle Shanahan is awesome at scheming up, running the football. Their running backs constantly get points on the ground. And Trey Sermon to me, I just think when you look at it realistically, okay, I think the 49ers are going to be what Atlanta was in 2015, 2016. So Atlanta was Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, right? So, Tevin Coleman is like Raheem Mostert. And Devonta Freeman is like Trey Sermon, right? Trey Sermon is bigger. He's got more size to him. He's got more of an in-between-the-tackles ability. Raheem Mostert, they tried Raheem Mostert as the lead guy, as the main ball carrier. But he is better as a change of pace. Raheem Moser doesn't need 20 carries to be effective. He needs 10. He needs 8. He's effective with that role, right? And he also doesn't catch a lot of passes. So to me, the guy in the Niners backfield is Trey Sermon because I think, especially down the road near the end of the year, Trey Sermon's going to see more carries. He's going to be in the pass downs role for one of the best offenses in the league, for one of the best OCs in the league. I think Trey Sermon is going to be the lead guy in San Francisco. Now, I think both of them can be effective. Both of them can have a role. Even if Raheem Mostert doesn't get hurt, which is probably unlikely, Trey Sermon can still be effective because he'll probably see more carries because he's the running back that's built to take more touches, period. It's just simple mathematics. All right? So those are my guys at the running back position. Saquon, Joe, Mixon, Chase Edmonds, Damien Harris, Trey Sermon. Wide receivers. You ready, Ultra? My number one my guy is Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley can finish as the number one wide receiver in fantasy this season. He will see the highest target share in the NFL. He had the most 100-yard games in the NFL last year. Calvin Ridley is Jerry Rice levels of smooth and route running capabilities. This guy doesn't miss. This guy is always open. This guy, when you compare him, right, let's just say to Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs has got to play Xavier Howard. He's got to play Stephon Gilmore. He's got to play J.C. Jackson. Bro, who the heck is Calvin Ridley playing? Rookie Carlton Davis, who's good but not great, and he took his lunch money last year. Marshawn Lattimore, who's more inconsistent than Party in the Discord. And So, like, you know what I mean? Like, Ridley is that dude. He is a must draft. I would drafting him at the end of the first round and the early second round. If it's the early second round, just freaking press the button. Don't even look. Put a blindfold on. Turn around. Get your sister to press the button. Get your mom to press the button. It doesn't even matter. Just draft Calvin Ridley. You will not regret it. I don't care who's sitting on the board. You will not regret drafting Calvin Ridley, period. Cooper Kupp is the next my guy. Cooper Kupp is next. So Cooper Kupp is going in the 4th round. Cooper Kupp is probably going to be the number 1 receiver for the Rams. Either way, high target share for both Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, to me, the reason why I say he's probably the number 1 is it seems like they have more rapport between Stafford and Kupp in training camp. He is more of the red zone threat, and he'll see more volume because he's the slot receiver. He's a very good route runner. I like both Bobby Trees and Cooper Kupp, but I like Cooper Kupp more. I think he has finished as a top 5 fantasy receiver before, and I don't think that's outside his range of outcomes to do that again with Matthew Stafford. And as I said, without Cam Akers, there's a large possibility that underneath targets now go more to Cooper Kupp. And especially with a guy like Matthew Stafford, who's great at the end of halves, who's great at the end of games, who's always making comebacks, Cooper Kupp is that type of guy that gets the drive started, moves the football, constantly gets first downs. He's just going to be a very, very safe pick, I think. My guy is Odell Beckham Jr. Now, I know some of you are going to say, Mitch, you think he's your guy every year. Now, here's the thing, okay? Odell was getting a little bit, he was rich 2 years ago, obviously, for obvious reasons. He was still a little bit rich last year. This year, Odell is entering the second year in this offense. He is back healthy. He's been healthy the entire training camp. He has not missed time at all during training camp. And there are receivers who have. DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Brown, Julio, etc. All right, there are a lot of receivers who are missing time in camp. Odell is not one of them. He is healthy. He's ready to go. He's been sprinting since June. Okay, so Odell's ready to go. Baker and him have a connection. I think this year. I think the Browns are going to be the best team in the AFC this year, arguably. And I think a big reason is because of this downfield connection. I think Stefanski's going to open up the role of Odell, moving him around the formation. He's clearly their number 1 receiver. How often can you get Odell Beckham Jr. in the 5th or the end of the 5th round? That is absolutely ludicrous. You are getting one of the most talented receivers in NFL history in the 5th round of your draft on one of the best offenses in the NFL as your wide receiver 3 most of the time. Your wide receiver 3, who is one of the few wide receiver 3s who can actually finish as a wide receiver 1. So that is like stealing candy from a freaking baby. All right? Odell is my number 3, my guy at wide receiver. Antonio Brown is my number 4. Antonio Brown, you can get in the 8th, 9th round right now. And Antonio Brown, there is in the range of outcomes for Antonio Brown, AB, to finish as the best Bucs receiver on this offense. During training camp, Antonio Brown has been the best Bucs receiver at training camp. Antonio Brown is a top 10 receiver of all time. Antonio Brown he didn't even play football. He suited up for half a year and still ripped crap last year at the end of the year, destroying the Atlanta Falcons numerous times, destroying everybody in his path to a great finish of the season last year. It took him like 1 or 2 games to get going, and then he took off. He scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Antonio Brown is a stud. I mean, the guy works harder than anybody else. The guy is one of the best route runners of all time. The guy will not see the number 1 corner on his team, on the opposing team, because they'll be covering Mike Evans. And he has a huge rapport with Tom Brady. They're literally like best buddies now. So if you're picking a Bucs receiver, I get it. Like if you pick Evans, if you pick Godwin, they're good picks. But the value in the draft is Antonio Brown, because Antonio Brown can finish first out of all of these guys, and he's going 6 rounds later. So Antonio Brown is the guy to me and the value there. Corey Davis is the next guy. So Corey Davis finished with 90 yards per game last season. Corey Davis, 90 yards per game. Do the math. All right? He was a legit fantasy option for you last season. He leaves the Titans as the number 2. He becomes the number 1 on the Jets. And his ADP is the 8th or 9th round. Are you kidding me? Corey Davis is a good football player. Corey Davis has been ripping it up in the preseason. Corey Davis is Zach Wilson's favorite target. Stop sleeping on Zach Wilson and Corey Davis. He's that late round must-have wide receiver who's definitely going to finish as the 3rd receiver. Probably will finish in the top 24 this year. And my final must-have wide receiver is Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers is going in the 11th, 12th, 13th round. Jacoby Myers last year, his on pace when he played, Jacoby Myers was on pace for 84 catches and over 1,000 yards last season in all the games he started. Like, he's going in the 11th round. He's the best receiver on New England. Every single training camp report is like Jacoby Myers caught 5 passes. He caught 6 passes. He caught 7 passes. He can't be covered. The guy's such a good route runner now. He is in the... guys, trust me. I'm a Patriots fan. If there's ever a productive receiver on New England, each and every year it's the slot receiver. It is. Every single time. It's Edelman. It's Welker. It's Troy Brown. That slot role always is productive for fantasy. Amendola when Edelman was out. It's going to be Jacoby. He's the guy. He's the guy to own in that receiving core. He is must draft. So Jacoby Myers is the guy late in drafts. My must own guys, my guys at tight end. Tyler Higbee, number 1. So Tyler Higbee is going sometimes on certain websites like the 10th, 11th round. You know, I could see him going as high as the 7th or 8th round. So Gerald Everett left. So this is why I like Tyler Higbee so much. Gerald Everett left. So the only tight end running routes on their offense will be Tyler Higbee. Like, Tyler Higbee is that guy. Matthew Stafford loves tight ends. They're going to be a fast-paced, more efficient, more effective offense. He's going to scoop up the underneath targets that were left from Cam Akers, just like Cooper Kupp. And we've seen it before from Tyler Higbee. He's had at the end of 2 seasons ago, he was on a Travis Kelce-like path at the end of the year and tear at the end of the year. Tyler Higbee is just a good player, a good route runner, and I think is going to find comfort with Matthew Stafford as the 3rd option in this offense. I think he's a good late round pick. Then we have Mike Giuseki. Mike Giuseki, however you say his friggin' name, the Miami Dolphin tight end is, I think, and thanks to Durkheim for this, the most slept on route runner at this position in the NFL. Go watch his highlights. Mike Giuseki is a legitimately good player. He's a great athlete. He can jump very high out the gym. He's a great red zone target. Tua loves him. He was his favorite target last year. And I think everybody is focused on, Waddle. Everyone's focused, Waddle's good, okay? Everyone's focused on Will Fuller, who's probably going to be suspended again or hurt. Probably have a hamstring injury already. Then you have Devante Parker, who probably has a groin injury tomorrow. So, Mike Giuseki, I understand that they're not necessarily putting him out there for every rep. But what you got to understand is that he is going out on all the reps that matter. He is running all the routes. He is getting in the end zone. He is converting 3rd downs. He is a big play tight end. So even though he doesn't see the volume of Darren Waller, he'll see big downfield targets. And that's where Tua is going to go down the field, down the middle of the field, down the seam. So he is the guy that I really, really like because he's being slept on heavily. He's almost being avoided by people because of the ambiguous receiving core. But I'm telling you, this guy is a top 5 receiver, top 6 receiver at this position. It doesn't matter that he can't block in fantasy. We don't want him to block in fantasy. Jonnu Smith is my guy at tight end. So Jonnu Smith he was signed to huge money. I think, like the third most money in the league at this position, or maybe even the second most. Him and Hunter Henry both come in, but I think people are forgetting that Jonnu was the one that was signed first. Jonnu is going to be used more as a weapon. I think Hunter Henry is going to be used more in the dirty areas, right? As a blocker, as an inline tight end. I think Jonnu Smith is going to be in the slot more. He's going to be moved around more. He's going to be in motion more. He's going to be in the backfield more. He's going to get the ball because he's such a good playmaker with the ball in his hands. And New England loves to utilize these players. So I really, really like Jonnu Smith. I think he's a really good player and really good talent. And I think it's about time that he breaks out in New England. So those are my guys at tight end in fantasy. All right. So now we've gone through everything strategy-wise, everything in terms of sleepers, in terms of my guys. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through the ADP of ESPN, and I'm going to give you guys that I think should be going higher, should be going lower, our Steelers, our busts, our steals, our values in your draft. Okay? So let's go through that. Here we go. And then we'll go Q&A at the end for a little bit. So there it is. Q&A is coming up. All right. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. I am on right now. This is fantasypros.com if you want to check this out. This is Fantasy Pros ADP. And their ADP, this is PPR. So their ESPN ADP can be found under the PPR scoring, and Yahoo ADP can be found under half PPR scoring. So I know a lot of you guys said you play on ESPN, so I chose to go with ESPN. So this is the overall. Let's go through it. So, and it actually says here, so ESPN, all these different places. Sleeper is here. FFC is there as well. All right. So, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Zeke. So, in the top 5 there, those are the top 5. Those are the obvious top 5, I think, just because of Saquon's risk. I would personally, in PPR, draft Zeke over Derrick Henry. But I'm not necessarily going to get mad at you if you draft Henry over Zeke. I just think Zeke's upside is higher. But McCaffrey's for sure the number 1 pick. Dalvin Cook's for sure the number 2. Kamara's for sure the number 3. Saquon's at number 6 on ESPN. So when you look across, he's at number 5, number 7, number 10, number 7, number 11, number 5. So his average is number 7 right now. On certain more sharp sites, he's at the end of the first round. So I would say Saquon on ESPN is probably going a little bit too high. So I would probably pick in PPR, I'd probably pick Adams. I'd probably pick Kelsey above Saquon. All right. Even though he's my guy, I'd probably pick Adams and Kelsey above Saquon, but I'd take Saquon 8th. All right. Then we have Chubb, Taylor. I think they're going far too high in PPR. I would move Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor down, probably into the second round. I would move Tyreek Hill up. I think Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, I think would be up at number 9 for me. Aaron Jones at number 10, Tyreek Hill 11, and then I'd move like right here. I can tell you right now, some values right now. So Ridley's a value. Ridley's a value right there. Wide receiver 6 at 20, he's a value. So it says we're sorting by ESPN. So, okay, just making sure it's ESPN. So this is a little bit different. So you have Zeke at number 8 then, it says on ESPN, which is interesting. So I'd say Zeke is a value. So, even in the first round, like, there can still be values in the first round, right? Can you guys see the whole list, by the way? Let's see. Maybe I should move to this side. I think that's better. So, yeah, I would say Zeke is a value right now because I think he's much better than the 8th player on ESPN. Like, he should be going in the top 5. I think you would swap Saquon and Zeke, and I'd be very, very fine with that. Tyreek at 9's fine. Jonathan Taylor and Chubb, I think, should be moved down as I suggested and replace them with Eckler and Jones. And again, Calvin Ridley is a massive value on ESPN. So if you're playing in ESPN, just know that you could probably get Calvin Ridley at number 20 or number 19. So that would be like, let me see. So if there's 12 picks, so the first 12, right? Then you're 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. So you could have the 6th pick in the draft, and you could potentially go with a Kelsey Ridley in PPR or an Adams Ridley or maybe even a Zeke and Ridley, which would be amazing. So I'd say on ESPN, the 6th pick is a really good pick to have, or the 5th pick, because I love Ridley. Gibson, RB12, that's about fine, I think. AJ Brown, I don't know why Mahomes is going this high. He should go much lower than that. I don't understand why he's going at 18. Who else? Joe Mixon, I think, is a value at RB13, as I've said. I think he's, in PPR, I think he's better than Gibson. I think he's better than Harris. I think he's better than Chubb and Taylor. So I'd have Eckler above him. I'd have Jones above him, but he'd be like my number 9, number 10. Waller and Kittle are going about right. I would say Waller is probably the value there because I don't think Kittle should be going that close to Waller, in my opinion. Keenan Allen, McLaurin, Josh Allen should be going lower. Another quarterback probably going too high. David Montgomery at RB16 makes sense. CD, so that's, it's not too crazy. CD Lamb at wide receiver 11. Allen Robinson and CD, I would say, are pretty close. Mike Evans, Miles Sanders, Okay, so this is where I'd say, like, this starts to separate for me. So Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift are much, much lower for me than Robert Woods. I have Chris Carson above both of them. I have Cooper above them. I have Godwin is a screaming value here at 44 overall. That's a value. Same as Cooper, I would say. Andrews is probably going too high. Like, he shouldn't be going above Cooper Kupp or Tyler Lockett. Like, Tyler Lockett and Cooper Kupp are values on every platform, I would say. So those are two guys that you can get in the 3rd, 4th round, maybe even the 5th round, that are really good values right now. Darrell Henderson is a great value at RB21. I think he's better. Like, J.K. Dobbins is going at RB15. I think Darrell Henderson's a better pick in PPR. Deontay Johnson's solid right there. Dak and Wilson. Edmonds is going in about the right range, I would say. Brandon Ayuk. I think Brady's going high in overall, but QB9 is probably too low. I would say I'd take Odell over Chase. I think Higgins is a value at wide receiver 25. I have him closer to, the teens. Juju is overvalued. Galladay is overvalued. I'd move them down. Tampa Bay defense, of course. There they are. Javonte Williams, RB25. So this is what I'm talking about, guys. So look, this is pick 71, right? So what's 71? That's like the 7th round? Is that the 7th round? Or the 6th round? The late 6th, early 7th, right? So, yeah, that's a value. Javonte Williams is a league winner. He's a league winner at 71. James Robinson's going to move up for sure. I think, like, Sutton's probably going too high. I would take Judy over Sutton. Judy's a value. So, if you guys are on ESPN, you should be, like, starring this right now. Like, Odell is a value. Javonte's a value. Jerry Judy's a value. Chase Claypool's a massive value on ESPN. Wide receiver 28. He has the potential to be a top 12 receiver. Noah Fant is a huge reach at 79. Mike Davis is actually probably at a good spot, honestly. What else? Brandon Cooks. What else? Don't draft Michael Thomas. Draft Devonte Smith over Michael Thomas, please. Devonte Smith to me is like a 6th round pick. He's going in the 8th or 9th at the 84th pick. So he's a good pick. Laviska should move up, I think. Don't pick a kicker at 89th overall. I will say that. And don't pick the Ravens defense. Tyler Boyd in PPR is a value on every platform. So pick Tyler Boyd. I'd say Leonard Fournette's overvalued. Dallas Goedert's overvalued. Don't pick those guys. Damien Harris is, again, a value. As I said, he's a my guy. RB31. He's going 95th on ESPN. He is, for me, a 6th or 7th round pick. So, Jarvis Landry, overvalued, I think, honestly. Debo's probably undervalued on ESPN. DJ Chark is massively overvalued. There is no way that Antonio Brown should be below DJ Chark. Like, not in any freaking universe, Antonio Brown should be below DJ Chark. I think DJ Chark is the 3rd receiver on his team. Mike Giuseki, we talked about him. I don't know if he's necessarily a value on ESPN, though. I guess he's kind of solid, I guess. Who else? Marvin Jones Jr., I'd pick ahead of DJ Chark. He's going as the wide receiver 52 at 110. So I'd pretty much swap him and DJ Chark. Corey Davis, again, guys, we talked about Corey Davis. He is a huge value here. 112th. Gronk is overvalued just because he's Gronk. I'm going to be honest. Mike Williams, that's a pretty good pick. That could be a good pick for you. A.J. Dillon, we talked about him. Michael Carter, at 122, that's not a bad pick. But right now, he's the third running back on his depth chart. So if you pick Michael Carter, you're going to have to wait. I'm just letting you know. Cole Beasley and PPR is a good pick, I would say. Probably over... look, guys, we talked about Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones is going as the running back 34, 126th overall on ESPN. 126th! This guy's going below James Conner, who can barely move. He's going below Gronk. He's going below a 3rd-string running back. He's going below an Asian kicker. He's going below... who else? Marquise Brown, who I don't even know if he can get open. He's going below Melvin Gordon, who's going to lose his job. He's going below Kenyon Drake, who's a backup running back. He's going below DJ Chark. He's going below Jarvis Landry. He's going below Dallas Goedert. Actually, Leonard Fournette is going above Ronald Jones. So Ronald Jones might be the biggest value on the entire ESPN platform here at 126. He's going one spot ahead of Trevor Lawrence. Tyler Higbee is a good pick where he's being picked. Bro, Trey Sermon is... okay, honestly, I take away what I said about Rojo. Trey Sermon is the biggest value on ESPN. Running back 33 at 129th, guys. Just look at this. Bro, just look at this. He is being drafted on FFC 74th. Guys, this is the easiest way to get good at fantasy. Just look at the Sharp websites. Guys, just look at Underdog Fantasy's ADP and compare it to ESPN or Yahoo or NFL.com. And that is honestly how you'll get the easiest values in your draft. Just go to just search up Underdog Fantasy ADP and compare it to ESPN. And then this is the cheat code of fantasy. I'm giving you the cheat code to fantasy right now. Go to Underdog. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull my camera up right now. All right. This is the cheat code of fantasy in 2021. Go to Underdog ADP. Underdog Fantasy. Search this up on Google. Underdog Fantasy ADP, average draft position. Compare it to the ADP, average draft position of ESPN, Yahoo, and NFL.com. Do it right now. You will find the easiest values you will ever have in fantasy history. Okay? I'm looking at Trey Sermon right now. Trey Sermon is going 129th on ESPN. On Sleeper, he is going 87th. On FFC, he is going 74th. How is there that big of a discrepancy there? That is unbelievable. Ronald Jones is going 126th. On FFC, he's going 82. On Sleeper, he's going 85. Underdog, Sermon's a 5th or 6th round pick. On ESPN, he's a 10th round pick. That's unreal. Unreal. Those are the values. What else we got? We got Durkant's favorite kicker, Jason Sanders. We've got Michael Pittman. So Michael Pittman on ESPN is going 151st. And just compare this. Just look, bro. On Sleeper, he's going 111th. Why? Why is he going 40 spots lower on ESPN? Why? Jacoby Myers, the value of the draft, the best pick in fantasy. Wide receiver 66th. If Jacoby Myers plays all 16 games, I absolutely guarantee wide receiver 66. So that's 12, that's 24, 12, that's 36, that's 3, 12, that's 48. He is going as a wide receiver 5 on ESPN. Unreal. That's actually higher than these other sites, which is unreal, other than MFL. Wide receiver 5. If Jacoby Myers simply has 2 legs and is playing football this year, he will outperform wide receiver 66. Period. Elijah Moore seems to be a value here. Again, guys, Tony Pollard, Trey Lance, big value on ESPN. What else? Marquise Callaway, Turtles boy, 65th wide receiver, value. Rondell Moore, we talked about him. Cam Newton, talked about him. Terence Marshall, talked about him. Rashad Bateman, talked about him. So those are the guys, pretty much. There we go. So if you guys have any questions, now's the time to ask. And I'll go through any questions that you have for the next 5 to 10 minutes. All right. Party says that Daniel Jones is a value. What's going on, guys? Nice to see you. Nice to see you staying up late, watching the bottom line. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Party says, Wentz at quarterback doesn't hurt him. LOL, but running game is a fair point. GSP says, I wouldn't take Pittman with Wentz at quarterback, and especially not since... But he's the number one receiver on his team. Why wouldn't you pick him? Well, look where I just said he's going. He's going as like wide receiver 50. If you want to lose your league, pick Daniel Jones. Who's a good late round running back? Well, there's never really a lot of great ones, but I would say if you can get a top tier handcuff, Tony Pollard, AJ Dillon, I always like going for those guys because, especially if you go receiver early, because if their starter gets hurt, you've got an RB1 on your hands. I would say, like who we were just saying, Trey Sermon is great. Ronald Jones is great. Those guys are awesome, in my opinion. GSP says, Mitch, I still need help. I got D-Hop, AJ Brown, Cooper, and Evans, and I can only start 3. Who should I trade? Just keep them, bro. Keep them. You never know. One might get hurt. Just wait for the season to start. I would keep them right now. Wait for people to panic, and then you can move on the trades. But I wouldn't trade right now. Corey Davis. That's your boy. Why not, man? Go for it. All right. Party's trying to make a case for T.Y. Hilton. I don't know, bro. We'll see. I think he's kind of dust, to be honest. Yeah, he is. It's tough, man. It's tough to rank him because of the ambiguous backfield. Guys, if you haven't already, make sure you do Gronk spike that like button, please. Gronk spike that like button. And if you're one of those that always watch my videos but never turn on the notification bell, can you please turn on the notification bell? Like, I'd appreciate that. I'd appreciate that. I mean, that'd be nice. I don't know. Just letting you know. All right. So, any more questions? If not, I'll answer any questions that you guys have in the comment section below. If you're watching this after the fact, which probably many of you are, just ask your questions in the comments. And if you have any keeper questions, any draft questions, any strategy questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'll get back to you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, the first episode of the Bottom Line season number 2 of the 2021 season. Thanks, guys, for watching. It's Mitch. Peace.